Recently uncovered from within the deepest corners of the Vatican archives was a private letter from the late Pope Francis to Cardinal-Bishop Luis Tagle. The contents were brief, with no subtle mystery.
My dear brothers and sisters, we thank our God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the God who is love, for gathering us as a family of faith.
Yet the story behind it has quietly stirred the Catholic community. What did the letter say? Was it a direct command on a matter settled months ago? Or was it a foresight of what should happen after his death? Join us as we uncover the clues, the intentions, and the story behind this sacred letter. What did it say? When someone very important writes a final letter, the words might be as simple as they get, but for those who look up to the person, the full meaning might not be known, and this was exactly what happened after Pope Francis passed away. Found deep in the secret vaults of the Vatican was a private letter from the late Pope Francis to Luis Tagle. It was written barely a few years ago and found shortly after the ancient book, Prophecy of the Pope, was recently examined for who the next leader would be, and the details found in these writings were nothing short of breathtaking. On the surface, the letter looked like a collection of strict rules to obey in his absence, but a closer look shows that it was more of a call than a command. It was filled with love and trust, and though the exact words haven't been put out there yet, for many Christians, it was like his ultimate approval for Luis to become the next global leader. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The reality isn't that simple, but there are good enough reasons to believe so. For one, Pope Francis and Cardinal Tagle have many things in common. Their friendship has been the subject of headlines from as far back as 2019, and besides their high roles in the Church, it was their shared love for serving others and staying humble that made them beloved by many within and beyond the Catholic world. While both leaders had strong convictions about the faith and its restrictions, they also believed that the Church should be more welcoming and kind to those beyond its walls. Thanks to these shared beliefs, there was no need for new rules and corrections on faith. Instead, he simply called the cardinal to keep up good work and walk in the values they believed in. It spoke about the future of the Church and allegedly had a high focus on staying true to the gospel, no matter how hard the world tries to break him. Many believe this because of the way Cardinal Tagle acted since the Pope passed away. Though many eyes were on him to start assuming titles on his own without major pushbacks, all he's done is take part in important church events like leading prayers and giving hopeful words. Cardinal Tagle is showing much more humility during this time of high negative expectations, instead of trying to take advantage of the high level of praise and attention during this time. For most, this reflects the mind of the Apostle Paul, who encouraged the Thessalonians in the 4th chapter of his first letter to excel even more when he is no longer around. Pope Francis's leadership style had always been about encouragement and not control. He wanted the Church to listen to people's hearts and follow Christ out of joy and not out of fear. That is why many believe his final letter to the cardinal was a call to the cardinal's heart, a reminder that the mission they were given had less to do with them and more to do with what God wants. As for how and when the letter was written, this is where it gets interesting. The story behind the letter. You see, the inspiration behind this letter goes all the way back to January 27th, 2019, during the late Pope's visit to Panama for World Youth Day. Many followers felt something was wrong when they noticed he couldn't walk up a ramp without help. Many at the time thought he was tired, but many talks erupted about his declining health for weeks, and the worries only grew worse on March 7th of that year, when the Pope skipped an important ceremony at the Lateran Basilica. It was an event no one expected him to miss out on, and the reason given by the Vatican was that he had a minor cold. All it took was a few days for outside reporters to put the pieces together, and the conclusions they arrived at were looking grim. Reporters noticed that he was coughing a lot more than usual at most of the events he attended in the previous month, while looking much more tired in the days before. Spring turned to summer, and the Pope continued in his duties. But the press noticed that he was making a lot of adjustments to save his energy. For example, on June 23, 2019, he celebrated the traditional Corpus Christi Mass without walking the full procession. 2 months later, during his trip to various African countries like Mozambique and Madagascar for various events, he was seen always looking uncomfortable after being put in sitting positions for a short time. Those who knew about his old lung problem reported that he was breathing a lot heavier than before. It was by December of that year when Pope Francis's health reports by leading news authorities were looking dismal. However, during this time, people began to notice something very interesting. While many media reports were more focused on the state of his health, Pope Francis was spotted on several occasions with another leading figure, and that was a man named Luis Tagle. Luis Tagle, at the time, was serving as the Archbishop of Manila in the Philippines. He was known by those within his community for being very kind and humble. He was much closer to the people around him than most church leaders were known for, and was admired by everyone for his caring heart of gold. Most of his public talks were about love, mercy, and faith, and he loved taking part in philanthropy. All these qualities formed the perfect recipe for the next pope, and for these reasons, the rumors started swirling that Pope Francis was starting to see the humble cardinal as the next leader of the church. This rumor reached its peak when news broke out on December 8th of that year that the Vatican had appointed Cardinal Luis Tagle as the new prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. This was one of the biggest offices in the Catholic Church, and this sudden appointment showed that Pope Francis deeply trusted the cardinal to lead the Church's mission work around the world. But for most, it was the first step given to prepare Luis Tagle for much bigger responsibilities in the future. December 31st of that year was a difficult time for Pope Francis. This was easily seen during the New Year's Eve Vespers service at St. Peter's Basilica. There he showed very obvious signs of tiredness, stumbling slightly while moving to the altar and needing help most of the time from his aides at the sides. His breathing was so heavy that he skipped parts of the long procession. But through these difficult months, Pope Francis kept a bold, brave face for the public. Things became much harder in 2020 when he canceled a planned mass in Rome shortly before the lockdowns went global. Once again, it was described as a mild cold, and even though the Vatican clarified that he wasn't suffering from 2020's disease, the pictures of himself looking much weaker than ever on Ash Wednesday couldn't quell the rumors. While this happened, Luis Tagle maintained close ties with Pope Francis, and it wasn't long before he tested positive for the disease. Just a few months after recovering, Pope Francis promoted Luis Tagle to be a member of the Vatican's Council of the Economy. This happened on October 15th, and it showed how Pope Francis believed Luis was ready to handle the major financial decisions that affected the future of the Church. But it didn't stop there. The future of the papacy. The next big moment happened in July of 2021 during the late Pope's visits to Iraq. During his walks, he was seen limping even with a lot of help and had to undergo surgery on July 4th for an intestinal disease. While this was happening, the late Pope was handing off more responsibilities to Cardinal Tagle. In the month of May, he was given the highest rank among the cardinals. This huge level of trust was unseen in recent times. Not only was he put in an office that planned the future of the Church, but Luis Tagle was now a leader among the pioneers of the Church. In just 3 years, he had grown from being an archbishop from the Philippines to becoming the eyes and ears of the Pope. After the Pope's surgeries on July 4th, he stayed in the hospital for 10 days and even signed an undisclosed document and put out a statement on his deteriorating health and what should happen when he becomes unable to serve. He sent out instructions to the cardinals and bishops on the next steps to take whenever the worst happens. This, dear viewer, is where many believe the sacred letter was written. But it was kept behind closed doors after Luis read it and would never be revealed to the public until today. By early 2022, the late Pope started using a wheelchair to help with his knee pains, and by May 5th, he canceled his trip to Lebanon for an important event because of how terrible the pain was. By June 10th, he postponed his long-awaited trip to Africa. When asked about his health after the announcement, he told reporters that he was advised to have another surgery, but refused to do so because he was still struggling with pains from the first one.
As Pope Francis canceled a weekend trip to Florence because of problems with his knee, the meeting took place in his absence, and it included an appeal for peace around the world.
During this time, he called on Cardinal Tagle to handle a huge chunk of his work while he focused on recovering. Because of how many times Luis Tagle represented the Pope in different meetings, people began to call him the voice of Francis. And this turned out to be the right decision, as things got a lot more serious in March 2023, when the late Pope was rushed to the hospital for bronchitis, and when he recovered, he looked a lot weaker than he was before. By September of that year, he started missing the biggest events entirely, while more reports spread online about his worsening conditions. And by January 2024, Pope Francis opted out of the Baptism of the Lord ceremony for the first time ever as Pope. By February, Pope Francis was moved from where he was to Gemelli Hospital in Rome, and while he was there, the breathing problems grew into double pneumonia. He remained in that hospital for 5 weeks and had to get by each day through strong medicine and oxygen. On March 23rd, Pope Francis left the hospital and went back to the Vatican to the surprise and cheer of those who welcomed him. He appeared for most of the major events during Holy Week at the end of March and the beginning of April. This was a huge improvement by all metrics, but the one thing that made people concerned was his weakened and mild voice. The sad day came on April 21st, when the late Pope suffered a stroke that led to a coma. Doctors said he went through an irreversible condition where his heart and blood circulation failed at almost the same time. It was that morning when Pope Francis passed away. And while the world mourned his death, it didn't come as a surprise to those close to him. If you ask them, they would say that he saw this coming in early 2019, and since then, had slowly prepared leaders like Luis Tagle to continue his mission. Luis Tagle had become the eyes, voice, and heart of Pope Francis, and the last letter proves that he might become much more. Pope Francis has made a terrifying revelation from Virgin Mary. According to him, the Virgin Mary appeared to him radiant yet sorrowful, giving a message of grave consequence. Virgin Mary, as a loving mother, seeing the pain and afflictions her children have endured, has shared the imminent danger that will unfold in the world. She urges her children to pay close attention to her voice and avoid distractions as she begins to reveal what is about to happen.
As I told you, if men do not repent and better themselves, the Father will inflict a terrible punishment on all humanity.
The world, she warns, is on the brink of something beyond understanding. A change is coming, one so critical that it will shake the world. For a long time, humanity has been warned about this change, however. Those prophecies that have often been ignored are beginning to unfold. Now, it is time for all to awaken to a truth that many have avoided, because what is approaching is not just an ordinary storm. It is something far greater that will test the faith, endurance, and spirit of each individual. But what exactly are these warnings that the Virgin Mary has been trying to convey for so long? Let's find out. The first warning from the Virgin Mary is consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart. This message is rooted in the Marian apparitions at Fatima in 1917, where the Virgin Mary appeared to 3 shepherd children, Lucia, Jacinta, and Francisco in Portugal.
The apparition of Our Lady of Fatima to the 3 children there in Fatima in Portugal.
Over several months, the Virgin Mary gave the children several messages, with one of the central themes being the consecration of Russia as a means to achieve global peace and prevent devastating consequences. During the apparitions, the Virgin Mary emphasized her desire for Russia to be consecrated to her Immaculate Heart, promising that if this were done, Russia would be converted, and a period of peace would follow. However, she also issued a dire warning. If her request was ignored, Russia would spread its errors across the world, leading to wars, persecution, and the destruction of nations. The errors Mary referred to are widely interpreted as the spread of atheistic communism and its associated ideologies, which took hold in Russia shortly after the apparitions with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917.
St. Petersburg is also where the Romanov family's darkest chapter began to unravel. Their centuries-long rule over Russia came to a bloody end there after the Bolshevik revolutions in 1917.
Communism, under Soviet leadership, promoted state atheism, suppressed freedom of religious, and sought to impose its ideology across other nations. The Soviet Union's global influence and its role in spreading communism to countries in Eastern Europe, Asia, and beyond are often seen as the fulfillment of this warning. From a historical perspective, many believe that the Cold War, the persecution of Christians in communist countries, and the repression of religious practices in Soviet-controlled regions all align with the Virgin Mary's prediction. The call for the consecration of Russia has been a source of much discussion and action within the Catholic Church over the decades. In 1942, Pope Pius VII consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, but some believed that this consecration did not fully meet the Virgin Mary's request because Russia was not specifically mentioned.
Some popes did make a consecration, but not the specific consecration of Russia as requested by Our Lady.
Pope Pius VII again consecrated the peoples of Russia in 1952, though this act too was seen by some as insufficient. In 1984, Pope John Paul II consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and this time he was more specific, referencing countries in need of this consecration. Sister Lucia, one of the original visionaries of Fatima, stated that this consecration was accepted by heaven. However, some groups within the Church have argued that the consecration did not explicitly name Russia and therefore did not fully meet the Virgin Mary's request. This belief has fueled ongoing debates among Fatima scholars and devotees about whether the consecration has been properly fulfilled. The consecration of Russia is more than a symbolic act. It represents a spiritual call to conversion and prayer aimed at redirecting the moral and spiritual trajectory of nations. In the context of the Cold War, Russia's global influence through its promotion of atheistic communism was seen as a direct threat to the religious and moral values of the world. By consecrating Russia to Mary's Immaculate Heart, the Church hoped to invoke divine intervention, bringing about the conversion of Russia and an end to the spread of its ideological influence. However, Mary's message extends far beyond a theological debate surrounding Russia. Let's take a closer look at other critical aspects of her warning. Similar to the consecration of Russia are global conflicts. Global conflicts are particularly related to the Fatima apparitions. One of the primary concerns raised in these messages was the spread of Russia's errors, which were interpreted as atheistic communism.
Atheism did not lead to communism. The communists were the furthest thing from atheists. Atheists in the sense of respecting reality, respecting reason,
and its destructive influence on the world. These errors were said to lead to wars, persecutions, and the suffering of nations. This warning was particularly critical considering the geopolitical tensions that followed, including the Cold War and the rise of communist regimes, which brought about global conflicts and humanitarian crises. In more recent times, Pope Francis has called upon the faithful to seek the intercession of the Virgin Mary in the face of modern conflicts, such as those in Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, and Myanmar. His consecration of both Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary in 2022 was a significant spiritual gesture to bring peace and reconciliation during a time of escalating tension.
Is heaven for real? And no matter how much you believe, we all sort of want proof. 14-year-old Colton is certain of the answer to questions we've all been asking for centuries. Is there a God? Is heaven for real? To what your vision was?
Heaven is so much better than how they use it in the movie.
In early March 2003, a mysterious story emerged from the heart of Imperial, Nebraska. A little boy, Colton Burpo, passed away during surgery. To the surprise of everyone, he regained consciousness and started recounting stories of mysterious encounters he claimed to have had in heaven after passing out. What did Burpo see in heaven, and what shocking revelation does he have about Jesus? Join us on a journey of faith, prayer, and the mysteries of heaven through the story of this young man.
You tell me what you remember about heaven, okay?
Okay.
Was it colorful or black and white?
It was colorful.
What kinds of colors?
Well, it's all the colors we have here on Earth.
Colton-Burpo's sickness. Imagine the terror of being whisked away for emergency surgery at the tender age of 4. Surrounded by unfamiliar faces and separated from your loved ones, the fear must have been overwhelming. This was the ordeal faced by little Colton Burpo, who miraculously survived an emergency appendectomy. His family's relief knew no bounds. However, as Colton recovered from the painful surgery, his parents, Todd and Sonia Burpo, noticed an extraordinary change in their son. Little by little, Colton began sharing astonishing tales of his heavenly adventure during the surgery. He disclosed surprising details and private family matters that left his parents stunned. It became clear that Colton's encounter with Jesus had profoundly changed his perspective on life. News of Colton's experiences spread rapidly, and people eagerly asked, "What is heaven like?"
Are there many people in heaven?
Yes, there are a lot of people.
Does heaven look like Earth?
It does have a little bit of the same texture.
Colton's vivid descriptions offered a glimpse into the celestial realm, leaving all who heard him captivated. It all started on a chilly March 2003. Colton Burpo woke up with a fever. To his parents, Todd and Sonia, it seemed like a typical childhood illness, a minor inconvenience that would soon pass. After all, Colton was a vibrant, energetic little boy full of life. Little did they know that their world was about to be turned upside down. At first, the signs were not serious: a slight fever, nausea, and stomach pain. However, the symptoms quickly escalated. Colton's once bright, active demeanor faded, replaced by increasing pain and lethargy. His parents watched in distress as his condition worsened, his fever spiking and his body trembling with each breath. Desperate, Todd and Sonia took Colton to the local clinic, where doctors, mistakenly diagnosing a simple stomach flu, sent them home with medication. But that night, Colton's pain became unbearable, and his tiny body began to convulse. Frantic, his parents rushed him back to the hospital, their hearts pounding with fear. Colton cried out in agony, holding his stomach, his once bright blue eyes filled with terror. His skin was pale and clammy, and the doctors were baffled. Hours passed as the medical staff searched for answers, but the delay in diagnosing the true cause of Colton's illness was proving to be fatal.
What we have today, and at the end of the day, they've kept true to their word to tell Colton's story, Colton's way, and we're really thrilled with it.
Unbeknownst to them, his appendix had ruptured, and for nearly 5 days, deadly toxins had been spreading throughout his abdomen, poisoning his body. Doctors were finally able to diagnose the infection as peritonitis. It has silently spread through Colton, and time has run out. The Burpo's world was crumbling before their eyes as they watched their son's condition deteriorate. Deep in their bones, they knew something was wrong. This wasn't just a fever or a stomach bug. It was a terrifying, painful illness. As a pastor, Todd had faced moments of despair, but nothing like this. The growing dread gnawed at him with each passing hour. He found himself at a breaking point, kneeling in the hospital's cold, dimly lit chapel, his hands held tightly together, trembling with fear. Tears welled in his eyes as he cried out to God with a desperation he had never felt. "Please, God, don't take my son," he pleaded. The weight of uncertainty was unbearable, and he needed a miracle. The doctors decided to perform emergency surgery. It was Colton's only chance. The family waited in agonizing silence as their little boy was wheeled away into the operating room. But what happened to him in the theater will shock you. Encounters beyond the earthly realm. Hours ticked by, each minute feeling like an eternity. Sonia stared at the clock, her heart pounding, her mind racing through the worst possible outcomes. Then, the unthinkable happened. During the surgery, Colton's heart stopped for a brief, terrifying moment. The little boy lay lifeless on the operating table, clinically dead. The doctors worked frantically to revive him, fighting against time and the odds. Amid this chaos, something extraordinary happened. While his body lay motionless, Colton claimed that his soul had ventured somewhere far beyond. When he was revived and brought back from the brink of death, the sterile hospital walls seemed to hold a new significance for Colton. The experience had left an indelible mark on him, forever changing his perspective on life. Colton's illness, which had plunged his family into despair, unexpectedly led them to a profound revelation. His near-death experience and subsequent account of what he saw in heaven would shock you.
His father Todd tells about Colton's near-death experience in the book, Heaven is for Real.
As the young boy lay on the operating table, slipping away into the clutches of death, his parents clung desperately to their faith. Doctors exchanged worried glances, whispering concerns about Colton's deteriorating condition. His heart eventually stopped, and he died. In that terrifying moment, he seemed to stand still as he crossed the threshold between life and death. However, instead of fading into darkness, Colton claims he was transported to a place beyond imagination, heaven. Miraculously, he returned to life, sharing an extraordinary account of his experience that would profoundly shake those who heard it. This was when things started to get interesting. You can't miss this part. Keep watching. Colton told his parent he saw Jesus radiating with love. As though that wasn't shocking enough, he started sharing other things he couldn't have known, which sent ripples through the world. His story raised questions about the power of prayer, faith, and the mysteries of the afterlife. He returned, not empty-handed, but with a message that would challenge beliefs and stir hearts. He had seen heaven, met Jesus, and returned to tell the tale. Initially, his parents were not sure how to react. His father, Todd, a pastor, assumed his son's strange words were simply the after-effects of anesthesia or trauma. However, Colton was adamant, describing a world unlike anything on Earth, a place filled with colors more vibrant and radiant than he had ever seen. Colton spoke of an overwhelming peace and joy, a serenity he couldn't fully explain but that enveloped him entirely. Heaven was real, Colton insisted, and he had been there. His parents were left speechless, unsure of how to respond. However, as Colton continued to describe this otherworldly realm, something shifted. His details were startlingly specific, far too precise for a young child to fabricate. He spoke of angels, their voices harmonizing in a celestial choir, singing melodies more beautiful than anything on earth. He described animals playing in endless fields of light, free and joyful.
Did you see animals?
Yeah, I saw animals, and one of the animals that I enjoyed playing with was the lions.
Every word he spoke painted a vivid picture of heaven, leaving his parents unsure what to believe. Then, Colton shared something even more astonishing. He began describing things that no one thought he could know. He claimed he saw his parents during his surgery, even though he had been unconscious the entire time. Colton said he watched his father, Todd, pray fervently in one room while his mother, Sonia, gathered with their church community in another. He knew exactly where they were and what they were doing. The eerie accuracy of his descriptions baffled his parents. How could their son, who had been in surgery, know these things? The months that followed Colton's recovery were filled with moments that left Todd and Sonia in complete awe. Colton began to share more about his time in heaven, slowly and almost casually, as if the memories were unfolding before him. He told his parents that during the surgery, he left his body and went to heaven. While his parents struggled to understand the possibility, Colton's innocent and unshakable belief in what he had seen was undeniable. But something more baffling is just ahead. Meeting the dead. One of the most emotional revelations came when Colton spoke of meeting people he had never known in life, people who had passed away long before he was born. Colton told his parents he had met his sister, a sibling they had never discussed with him. His sister, who they had lost to miscarriage before Colton was born, had been a secret they kept to themselves. Their young son was telling them about a sister they had never introduced him to. Colton described her in detail, mentioning she looked exactly like his sister in the real world, Cassie Burpo, but with brown hair. He also said she was hugging him too much, which made him uncomfortable since he wasn't a hugging person. She was there in heaven, waiting for her family, eager to one day meet her parents. This revelation shattered Todd and Sonia's hearts in a way they never expected. The grief they had buried long ago resurfaced, but this time, it came with an overwhelming sense of peace. Colton said their daughter was in heaven, and she was excited to meet them when their time came. The moment was deeply moving, and Todd and Sonia couldn't help but believe their son had truly encountered something beyond this world. However, Colton's story didn't end there. He also said he met his great-grandfather, a man he had never known in life but whom he called Pop. Colton described him perfectly clearly, not as the older man Todd had known, but as a young and vibrant man full of energy and life. Todd was left speechless. Colton had never seen pictures of his great-grandfather as a young man, yet his description was eerily accurate. The more Colton spoke, the more Todd realized his son couldn't have made any of this up. As the stories unfolded, it became clear that Colton's journey to heaven was not just a figment of his imagination. He had seen something real, something profound.
The depth of what he'd experienced by any means. He'd just say little things once in a while.
The most shocking revelation came when Colton began to speak about Jesus with the pure innocence of a child. Colton described Jesus as a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He spoke of Jesus's dazzling white robes and a crown of gold surrounded by light so bright it was almost blinding. However, what left everyone in awe was the specific details Colton shared about Jesus. He described the marks on Jesus's hands and feet, marks that Todd instantly recognized as the wounds from the crucifixion. Colton had no way of knowing this, yet his description was unmistakable. What Colton revealed about Jesus sent shockwaves through everyone. Jesus, Colton said, wasn't just a figure of love and peace. He was preparing for something greater that would shape the world. Colton's words were simple yet profound, filling his parents with awe and fear. Colton described angels, other children, and a world far beyond earthly comprehension. He spoke of Jesus' smile, a warmth that made him feel completely safe, and a love that radiated from him, filling the entire space with light. As Colton's story spread, it reached people far and wide. Believers and skeptics alike were drawn in by the boy's extraordinary account of life after death. His innocence, unwavering certainty, and vivid details of what he had seen left people grappling with the question, could heaven be as Colton described? For Colton, there was no doubt. Heaven was real, and he had seen it with his own eyes. Todd Burpo, Colton's father and a pastor by profession, had always believed in the afterlife. Yet when his young son started recounting his otherworldly journey with vivid and detailed descriptions, Todd was left grappling with the implications of it all. He had been well versed in Scripture for years, teaching his congregation about heaven and Jesus. However, hearing his boy's claim firsthand forced him to confront his understanding of the afterlife in a way he never anticipated. As Todd listened to his son's extraordinary story, something changed. He had always believed in Jesus, but hearing Colton describe heaven so vividly, with such clarity and conviction, deepened his faith in a way he never thought possible.
Was everyone nice in heaven?
Yes, everyone was.
Was there bad weather?
No.
It was always sunny.
Spreading the message. It wasn't long before Colton's story spread beyond their small community, drawing in believers and skeptics alike. Some found hope in Colton's words, while others questioned the authenticity of his claims. Before this experience, Colton had grown up hearing his father, Todd Burpo, preach about Jesus and faith. As the son of a pastor, Colton knew about Jesus in the way most children in religious homes do, through Bible stories and church teachings. However, after his near-death experience, something changed. Colton's belief in Jesus shifted from something he had been taught to something deeply personal, as real and vivid as anything in the physical world. He no longer simply believed in Jesus. He had seen Jesus with those wounds, and his belief in the resurrected Christ became unwavering. Through this experience, Colton's belief in Jesus went from a simple childhood understanding to a deeply rooted certainty. The boy who had once learned about faith from his father now carried a message that would shock everyone and inspire countless others. At just 4 years old, Colton's near-death experience opened a window into the afterlife, leaving his family and the world grappling with his incredible tale. At the heart of the Vatican, Pope Francis consistently preaches the importance of simplicity and purity in faith, encouraging believers to place their trust in the divine love that flows from God. A key theme in his teachings is that heaven is not a remote destination, but a promise of eternal communion with God, overflowing with love and joy. Colton's extraordinary experience aligns closely with this message. His vision of heaven reflects the Pope's view of a God who warmly embraces all his children with unconditional love. Colton's intimate portrayal of Jesus suggests a profound encounter, resembling the way Pope Francis presents Jesus, not as a distant or abstract figure, but as a loving presence, both shepherd and friend. The Pope often describes God's love as that of a father or mother who never abandons their child, no matter how far they stray. In many ways, Colton's depiction of Jesus captures this same essence of unwavering divine love. The Colton Burpo story is a captivating tale, filled with intrigue due to his claims of visiting heaven, interacting with Jesus, and spending time with deceased loved ones. These intriguing claims are particularly noteworthy in an era where many people are increasingly focused on material possessions, often neglecting the spiritual realm. So what do you think? Will Luis Tagle become the next leader, or does the letter only imply a promotion to continue the good work? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.